Hi, my name is Austin Riley.
And I'm Morgan Green, and you are listening to CJSW 90.9 FM as a Airwaves.
This program is dedicated
to the education and exploration of disabled life,
giving voice to the life and experience of people with disabilities.
We cover a wide array of issues and disabilities.
We are people who discuss issues we are passionate about
and topics we are interested in.
We show how disability is in the mind of the beholder.
Today, we are talking to Michelle Kristinson,
Government Relations Advocacy Manager for Cerebral Palsy Alberta and member of Barrier Free Alberta.
Barrier Free Alberta is a grassroots advocacy movement
campaigning for comprehensive accessibility legislation to identify, remove, and prevent barriers for people with disabilities in the province.
Welcome to the show, Michelle. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us about yourself, your role, and how long have been with Barrier Free Alberta?
Great. Yeah, thank you. So my name is Michelle Kristinson, and I am the Government Relations and Advocacy Manager with Cerebral Palsy Alberta. And Cerebral Palsy Alberta is the organization that oversees Barrier Free Alberta. And so I've been with the organization for about 2.5 years. So that's the time that I've been involved with Barrier Free.
Wow.
When I came to Cerebral Palsy, I didn't realize that Barrier Free would be part of it, but it's very exciting that accessibility legislation was their priority. So yeah, I've been at this for about 2.5 years, but the committee's been at it much longer than me.
That's awesome. What is Barrier Free Alberta?
Yeah.
So Barrier Free is a grassroots movement, and our sole purpose is to advocate for accessibility legislation. So Alberta and Prince Edward Island are the only provinces in Canada that don't have accessibility legislation. So Barrier Free came together to say this is not right. Alberta requires this, they need it, and so we need to advocate for it. So that is, so a grassroots movement means that it's people who come together that are volunteers. So most of our committee have full-time jobs, and so we call this doing it off the side of our desk. So we try to have a meeting over lunch hour or just after lunch hour so that they can do that while they're still trying to do their job. So we're very, very fortunate to have some really awesome people who are contributing to Barrier Free, but we're trying to do this while everyone still has their own careers.
Nice.
How many members are a part of Barrier Free Alberta, and what are their occupations?
So Barrier Free Alberta is an entire movement. So it includes all people with disabilities across the province. But to make sure the work gets done, we have a committee. And so the committee, I call it a steering committee. So the people that are on the steering committee, they're people who are accessibility consultants. We have some lawyers who focus on disability law. We have the Alberta Human Rights Commission. So they look at all of the things related to human rights. And then we also have the Alberta Civil Liberties Research Center, and they also look at things from a human rights perspective. We have people who have lived experience. Almost everyone on the committee either has a disability or have a family member with a disability. So this isn't people doing the work who are separate or distant from it. Everyone that's involved in this has a very direct or close link to someone, or they themselves have a disability. So we have someone that used to be a former politician. We've got people who, so we also want to make sure we've got a really wide representation. So when people think of accessibility, they think of, making sure that there are door openers or there are elevators, but we know that people with disabilities are very, very vast. So we make sure we've got representation from the blind and low vision community. We have people who are deaf and hard of hearing. We have people who are on the autism spectrum. So we have a very wide range of people to make sure that we're representing what the realities are of people with disabilities in Alberta. So there's about 10 to 12 people on the committee, and then we have about 3,000 people who are supporters.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
How would you define a barrier-free province? What are the biggest gaps currently in Alberta?
I would say that Alberta, our government talks about building codes and safety, but, there's so much more to being accessible. So that's making sure that we've got ASL interpreters for people that are deaf when they go to, let's say, when they announced the Alberta Disability Assistance Plan, they had a consultation. And during that consultation, they didn't have closed captioning, they didn't have ASL. Well, when you're trying to get feedback from people with disabilities and you're not ensuring that there's plain language material available, that's a huge gap, because that means people can't participate. If you can't hear, you can't participate. If you don't understand what they're asking, you can't participate. So there are many gaps that are not necessarily obvious to the person that's not understanding disability. So I would say sometimes it's the subtle stuff. It's the things that are not obvious, because when we think of accessibility, we think of someone sitting in a wheelchair that can't get into a building. But we know that there's so much more to it. We talk about inclusion in schools. We talk about being able to participate in playground zones. So all of those kinds of things, those are some of our biggest gaps. And when the government does things, like when they have consultations and they don't make it accessible, they're saying to people with disabilities, we don't want to hear your feedback. That's the message that we get, right? So I would say that's a huge, huge problem in our province.
Yep.
Did I answer that okay, or do you have more questions?
I have a lot of problems in your province.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and other things too, when you think about transportation, when we have events, if you live in Calgary, we've got Calgary Transit Access. If you live in Edmonton, you've got DATS. But what if you want to go from, let's say you want to go from Calgary to Airdrie? What are the transportation options? What if you need to go to Cochrane or to Okotoks? So we don't have a very good transportation system. We also don't have very good, I think that a lot of times housing is not very good. When we have accessible housing, we need to make sure it's near transportation. We need to make sure it's near stores, because people with disabilities may not have a car or easy access to transportation. So it becomes quite complex.
Yes, I do relate, because I have to go, you say, because I have my swimming at different pools now. I have to get away from other people to take me to that places. What do you say?
So you have someone that can take you to those places?
Yes.
Yeah.
My mom and my dad.
Yeah, and that's really good until, what happens if they're not available, and then all of a sudden you're stuck.
Yes.
We should have something in place so you don't have to rely on family just in case they're not available or they're not there, right?
Right, yeah.
Can you discuss in detail a couple of 10 pillars of advocacy, education, and community change.
Barrier Free Alberta, we realized that there was a lot of focus on that built environment. So when we say built environment, we mean physical spaces. So we mean like door openers and elevators and ramps. So we started a campaign called Accessibility More Than You Think. And there are 10 pillars to that campaign. And that it takes a look at everything from the built environment to transportation to housing. And then it gets a little bit more complicated, communication, procurement. So what that means is so some of those pillars are difficult for people to get their heads around because they're kind of high level. There's stuff that happens at a different level, and we just kind of reap the benefits if it's done well. So for example, we want to make sure, just like I say, with housing, we want accessible housing, but we want to make sure it's close to things that you can access in case you don't have transportation. We also want to make sure that if people need to go to the doctor or they need to get a test, that when they get there, they're going to have the right to care. So that means people aren't, we've heard stories of people having medical exams done in the back of their vans because the clinic wasn't accessible. Or here's another one that if you go to the hospital and you're going to have surgery, they tell you don't bring your hearing aids because we don't want anyone to steal them. Well, if you can't hear, you're not going to know what's going to happen with the doctor and the surgery. Like this isn't an extra. This isn't a watch or earrings. This is, that's like saying to someone, well, you know what, leave your wheelchair at the door and drag yourself in because your wheelchair is, too much of a problem. Pillars of accessibility are trying to break down all of the other aspects of accessibility. It includes transportation, housing, something called procurement, information and technology. So that means, going back to that example of the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, when they did the consultation, they didn't make sure it was in plain language. So not everyone could understand it. We want to make sure that when they hire someone, so when the government of Alberta hires someone to do a consultation, that they have all the tools that people with disabilities require. So I don't know if that answers your question, but in terms of education, it means making sure everyone has access. Inclusion is for everyone. And we want to make sure that if people cannot go into a regular classroom, then they need to make sure there's a backup. You can't just say you can't go to a classroom and have nothing else to go to. And I'm sure many of the people that you work with and socialize with can tell you lots of those kinds of stories where you've not been included.
What are the top 3 provide for Barrier Free Alberta this year?
Well, I would say our top priority is to get accessibility legislation, but it's not that simple. So is to do better education with the government. The government of Alberta did not approve Bill 206, and Bill 206, that sounds complicated, but it was a proposed bill for accessibility legislation, and they said no. They gave reasons why they said no, and I think some of the reasons that they gave were poppycock. So we want to go back and educate them and say, okay, well, you've given us some of your reasons. Now we want to counter those with correct information, with lived experience. People who have disabilities have something to say. That, people who are not living with a disability, that don't have a family member with a disability, they need to understand that people who do not have that experience cannot comment and they cannot make those decisions. We need to have people with disabilities, educating and making those decisions. So one of our top priorities is to do more education. You guys know what it's like to have a disability, right? You know some of the challenges. So we need to get that message out to other people. So the people that are in that, working at stores or working in businesses, or we need to get that out to the general public So I would say we want to make sure that government is informed. We want to make sure that every Albertan is informed about what accessibility means. And here's something that's kind of funny is that accessibility helps people with disabilities, but it also helps everyone else. I hurt my back a couple of weeks ago. And so, I've been struggling a little bit. So when I can go up a path versus going upstairs, it helps me. Now, when families are young and they've got a baby in a little buggy, it helps that they don't have to carry that buggy upstairs. They can just push up, right? So there's lots of benefits. So we want to make sure every Albertan understands that this is not about adding on. This is about inclusion, making sure everyone is included in our province. And then I think the third priority would be just getting a whole army of people behind us to say this is important. We want to engage people with disabilities to get that message out.
I agree with you.
What is the status of a campaign for an Accessible Alberta Act?
Well, sadly, on March 23rd, the government said no. Ooh. So we are back, not at square one, but we are back we sort of feel like we're back at the beginning and we've got to do a lot more education. So they had their opportunities to say, yes, this is important, and they said no. So right now the status is that we are back to trying to make this happen again, which is very frustrating, and we were very, very sad about this. A lot of people did a lot of work, and the government said no.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame.
Yeah, it was a shame. We were at the legislature when they said no, and there were people with disabilities there that were very, very distraught. It was very, very upsetting for people because, we've been waiting for this for decades.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But we won't give up, right?
No, we won't give up.
Disabilities are resilient. Yeah, we've got fight in us left.
Yes. I agree with you.
Are there opportunities for individuals with disabilities to be directly involved in advocacy efforts?
Absolutely. So one of the other things, I oversee Barrier Free Alberta in the sense that I help organize it and keep it on track. But I also oversee the Alberta Ability Network, and that's a network of people who are disability organizations. For example, DDRC is a member, and then people with lived experience are welcome to join the Alberta Ability Network. We also call it AAN, so AAN. And then with Barrier Free, like I said, we're going to maybe have I think we're going to have a town hall and ask people with disabilities, like, what do they think our next move should be to get accessibility legislation? How can they be involved? Yeah, and I think I think people with disabilities are the most important factor in all of this. So yes, we 100% want to include people with disabilities in a greater capacity, greater involvement.
Awesome.
When is your town hall?
Oh, what are the challenges? My gosh.
When is your town hall?
Well, we haven't decided yet.
You haven't decided yet?
Yeah, we're still, we were still recovering from the no of the bill. So we are going to, we're still figuring it out. But I'm hoping maybe late May, we're going to plan a town hall. But I will definitely let folks know so you can participate if you'd like to be involved.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll definitely share that.
What are the biggest challenges you face in the work you do?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think right now, sometimes it's hard to work for years towards something and then it not go somewhere. And then you have to learn how to grieve that it wasn't successful and then figure out the next steps. So that can be challenging because, you work for a long, discouraging or challenging. And it can be challenging because funding, all of our organizations, we get funding from the government or from different funders, and they have expectations of what they want us to do or not do. So we have to work within those confines. And we also are working in Alberta, and our government this is a different time in politics for us to be working. So it can be challenging. If that makes sense. If I can clarify if you need more clarification.
It is makes sense to me. Can you tell us about the most recent event or rally he hosted?
Sure. So we hosted a rally last May. So my goodness, it's almost a year ago. So we hosted a big rally at the Alberta Legislature last May, and even though Barrier Free Alberta is focused on accessibility legislation, because of some of the announcements from the government, like clawing back the Canada Disability Benefit, introducing the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, we decided for a period of time to expand what we do, and we held a rally at the legislature last May, and so we had about 500 people. It was hard to tell. I was trying to count all the people, but we had about 500 people there, and we had people with disabilities and organizations with different signs. And then afterwards, about 90 of us went to the Alberta Legislature for question period, where they focused all on disability issues. So that was our last big event, but Barrier Free Alberta continues to hold events throughout the year. So we have lunch and learn opportunities in a variety of advocacy. So we do some evening sessions where we talk about how to advocate and things like that. So even though we had that one big event, we're still doing lots of stuff throughout the year.
Wow. Where can our listeners find you?
All right, good question. So we have our own website called barrierfreeab.ca. So Barrier Free Alberta, we've got our own website, and on that website is lots of information and different ways to get involved. But then we're also on social media. So Barrier Free Alberta has a Facebook account, we have an Instagram account, and we have a LinkedIn account. So there are, a variety of ways that you can reach out to us and get involved. And earlier I talked about the Accessibility More Than You Think campaign, talking about the 10 pillars of accessibility. If you follow our social media, each month we spend 1 month dedicating to one pillar. So in April, we've been dedicated on the justice system. So if your viewers, your followers, your listeners would like to connect, they can look us up on any of those social media accounts.
Thank you. How can our listeners connect? Involved?
Yeah, well, there's actually lots of ways. So if you visit our website, on our homepage, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a place for you to become a supporter. Now, if you sign up as a supporter, you just go in there and you fill in your name and your email, and then we will make sure that you get your updates. So that's one way that shows that you're supporting accessibility legislation. If you wanted to, you can also you can follow us on social media. So you can follow Barrier Free Alberta on the 3, so Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. So you can like and share and follow. But you can also, we also have something called New Mode. And New Mode is it's a platform for us to be able to do some advocacy. So we have a letter campaign going on there. So you can also follow on that. And I can send you guys all of this stuff afterwards, so you've got all the links and things like that if you would like it. And just get involved. Just if you can also call me up and say, how can I get involved? And I'll redirect you or direct you to where you need to go. So there's lots of ways, and participate in, the lunch and learns and some of the sessions. And you hear about the different groups, and because Barrier Free is one organization or one movement trying to get this, but there are other people doing lots of cool stuff. So you don't necessarily have to do it through us, but it would be great if you did. So I will send all of those links and stuff to you.
Sounds clear.
Awesome.
What is the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the key takeaway is that accessibility is about more than you think. I think that we need to do a better job of educating what accessibility means. So accessibility is not just about ramps, and it's not about elevators and push buttons. It's about making sure everyone can participate at the playground. Everyone can access transportation. Everyone can go to the doctors and have, access to the doctor without having to have exams in the back of your van. So I think it's just about so much more is that, and that we need this. So other provinces have laws in place to make sure that the government is doing their best to make sure accessibility is a priority. And Alberta has chosen not to do that. So Alberta has chosen to go at it in just pieces. I'll address this piece and that piece because I see it. It makes sense to me. But if they don't see the other stuff, if they don't think that other things are a priority, then there's nothing in place to make them address it. So it's kind of what we call piecemeal. They're just kind of going at it piece by piece and kind of addressing here and there. We want something comprehensive, which means we want it to be very thorough. We want it to be in depth. And then we also want it to be enforceable. If you go somewhere and there's a lack of accessibility, we want the government to be able to say, okay, this is not acceptable, right? So this gets a little complicated. I don't want to complicate things too much, but right now we have the Human Rights Commission. So if you go somewhere and you're discriminated against, you can go to Human Rights Commission and file a complaint. But accessibility legislation means trying to make it so you don't ever have to go to human rights. So it's what we call preventative. We don't want people to have to fight their way for basic needs. We want it to be guaranteed. So it's a little bit complicated. If I can kind of break that down a little bit more, please let me know, because it's not always easy to talk about some of these things in a very straightforward way.
Yes, I do agree with you. Is there anything else future like to add today?
I know people with disabilities are feeling fearful and they're feeling frustrated with everything that's happening, but there is power. There's power in our community. The disability community, I've been involved my entire life, and we are a resilient, resourceful, feisty group, right? We don't just take stuff laying down. So I think that if we continue to work together, we are going to see some differences. We just have to come together and continue to keep pushing. And it's exhausting, especially when you have a disability, fighting for the things that everyone else, takes for granted. But it's a fight worth having. And, I'm hoping Barrier Free makes that path a little bit easier for people. We want you to join us. So don't give up hope. We're not going to give up, and we're going to just keep on keeping on.
I agree with you. Women power. Yeah,
right on, yeah. Love it.
Thanks for much coming to the show.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. You've been listening to Accessible Areas on CJSW 90.9 FM.